You're listening to the CIP podcast, the Study Abroadcast, episode 9. I'm your host, Mike, an education abroad advisor with the Center for International Programs at the University of Guelph. In this show, we explore the world of study abroad, offering advice, insights, and travel stories, bridging perspectives and cultures along the way. On this episode, we'll be speaking with a University of Guelph exchange student about their study abroad, as well as some of the highlights and challenges that shaped their journey. Let's get right into it. Today on the show, we are pleased to welcome Cyan. To get started, Cyan, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your exchange experience?
Hi, Mike. I'm really glad to be here on my exchange in winter of my third year. I went to Norway and I studied at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, which was just outside the capital of Oslo. Unfortunately, my exchange did get cut a little bit short due to COVID, but I really loved my experience and I got the chance to travel a bunch and do a bunch of really cool things and meet a bunch of really cool people. So I'm super happy with how my exchange went.
Nice. So that's a nice segue into our next question. What was the best part of your study abroad experience on a personal level?
I would definitely say that for me, the best part of my experience was meeting all the new people that I got to meet. It was definitely super scary and a little bit tough at first, moving to a new country with a new language where I didn't actually know anybody. But I just kind of reached out of my comfort zone and met a bunch of really amazing people that I'm still in touch with to this day. And I actually ended up going on a trip the very first weekend that I was there with about 8 people that I just met then and there. So it was definitely really scary, but the people that I met made my experience that much better because they just made everything more enjoyable. And I got to learn a lot and seeing how tons of different people from different cultures and countries interact. So that was really cool for me.
Did you get to travel to other places in Norway, or did you travel also outside of the country?
Unfortunately, I didn't really get to travel a bunch in Norway. I spent a little bit of time in the capital city. I did a bunch of day trips there. And then I was really fortunate and got to travel to Sweden, and I did a weekend in France. And then I did a really cool week-long trip into Lapland, so the northern parts of Sweden, Norway, and Finland, which was really cool and snowy and beautiful. So even though my trip got cut short, I got to do a bunch of really amazing things. So I'm really happy. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to travel a bunch in Norway. I spent a little bit of time in the capital city. I did a bunch of day trips there. And then I was really fortunate and got to travel to Sweden, and I did a weekend in France. And then I did a really cool week-long trip into Lapland, so the northern parts of Sweden, Norway, and Finland, which was really cool and snowy and beautiful. So even though my trip got cut short, I got to do a bunch of really amazing things. So I'm really happy.
Sounds good. So in terms of your career and professional development, how did you benefit from your international learning experience?
I would say that my international experience really taught me a lot about the power of community. I think it really helped me to value the people around me. A new place where I didn't know anybody and I didn't know literally anybody there. Meeting other people made things a lot easier, and it really showed me that things are way better when there's people around you, especially considering how COVID has separated people. That was something that I really learned and valued. And then I also found out that I came back a lot more of an open person. I think that before I had always thought of myself as a fairly open, encouraging, engaging person, but coming together with people from so many different backgrounds, from so many different countries, from so many different languages, really changed my perspective on a lot of things, and it made me much more accepting of people's differences and the beauty within that and the power of that, and how that's a really good thing to bring different people together. I think that's 2 of the big things that I really got from my exchange experience.
I get the sense that when students go on exchange, one of the amazing things that happen very early on is that they're able to connect with other exchange students from other countries, and they're all in this experience together. So I think that bonding is a big part of the process for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That's a really big part of the process I found.
So obviously those are some of the great things that are involved with exchange. What were some of the more challenging aspects of your study abroad experience, and how did you overcome that challenge?
I would say there was 2 really difficult parts of my experience. I would say that the first is this is a bit of an abnormality, but having to come home early due to COVID, like having geared up for this experience for like since I was in high school basically, and then to have it get cut short, and when I was supposed to be gone for like 6 months and coming home after like 8 weeks was really, really hard to cope with. But I found that like staying in touch with people, especially the people that I met on my exchange, and then just trying to stay as positive as possible and be really grateful for the experience that I did get, despite the fact that it got cut short, made it a little bit easier. I mean, it still was really unfortunate, but yeah, really staying in touch with people that I met. And then I would say the other really, really hard part was when I first got there and like the language barrier and having to like explore the school and the town that I was in. I ended up in, so when I did my exchange application, I actually did it like the day it was due. I didn't really like have a lot of time to look into where I was going. I just like knew that I wanted to do an exchange, and then my friend was going to a meeting and I ended up tagging along to the meeting, and it ended up being the last meeting that you could go to before applying for your exchange. So I think it was like that night I was trying to just bang out an application and pick a bunch of schools that I thought would be cool and countries that I thought I would like. So I ended up in a really tiny town outside of the capital of Norway, whereas I thought I was going to be in the capital. So for me, it was a really difficult adjustment being in like a little agricultural town as opposed to being a big city, because it was not what I had expected at all. So like the town literally had like 2 streets. So it was a really big adjustment for me. So kind of just coping with that and dealing with that was really difficult. But I found that I was really close to the city. Like I could explore it and I could do things within my town, but it was just a bit of an adjustment period. Once I realized that I was not where I had originally thought I was going to spend my entire exchange period.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really interesting points, especially when you come back from an overseas international experience. You have to readjust to being back at home. And I don't think a lot of students are prepared for that, especially during the times of COVID, where it was very much out of the blue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It was definitely like a very rapid adjustment, and like stressing to get my plane tickets and figure out where I was going to spend my quarantine days. And it was definitely not an easy experience, but I mean, we did it. We're here. We survived. So.
And you mentioned being in a very rural area. I guess perhaps in hindsight, that's what made the experience unique as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like I was forced to actually meet people and spend time with people as opposed to just kind of like going into the city and exploring what the city had to offer. I really had to make the most of the people around me and the friendships that I had, because otherwise I would have been very bored. I'm not going to lie. I would have had not a lot to do. I would have sat in my room a lot because there was like one restaurant in town. There wasn't a bar. There was like not a ton of like there was like a couple shops, like a grocery store and a thrift store. So yeah, it was definitely an adjustment, and I'm really glad that I had the people around me that I did to make that a lot easier, because I think we were all a little bit shocked by it.
Sounds good. So I wanted to ask about the role of social identity. How did your social identity in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status and cultural background, for example, impact your study abroad experience?
I didn't personally have a ton of issues in terms of my identity. I think that because my school hosted a ton of exchange students, there was people from all over the world. So I didn't really feel isolated or different in any way, just because there were people from so many different countries and backgrounds, that it was really like a melting pot of people and cultures and stuff. So it was really warming. It was nice to know that there were people from so many different experiences. I would also say that because I come from a mixed culture family, it was a lot easier for me to mix in with that group of people than it might be for some other people. I think that kind of understanding that there are so many different cultures and religions and nationalities and beliefs, that was a little bit easier, because people did things so differently. Like people ate differently and people played games differently and people interacted differently. So just kind of understanding that there were cultural biases, and even between countries, like it was very much, you could see like, oh, this girl is from that country, you can tell because of her mannerisms, but trying not to judge people based on that, I think, was really important. And then I don't think I faced a ton of issues, but I did actually have someone tell me that I was very forward and open with my opinions for a woman, so that was a little bit shocking to me. To kind of face that conversation, have to kind of ask them what was the deal there? Like, what was it that I had said? And it wasn't like a personal dig or anything, and it wasn't like I was doing anything wrong. It was just that this person was very shocked with they said I was very American, and it was kind of an interesting thing to hear, kind of not having ever experienced that before. So that was definitely a little bit of an eye-opener. I don't think it was a bad thing in any way, and I don't think it was meant from a place of malintent, but it was just kind of very interesting to see how that played a role in like kind of daily life.
Yeah, that's a really interesting example. And perhaps some would argue it's perhaps a culturally sensitive topic. Um, I'm sure at the time it may have caught you off guard, but were you able to sort of process that moment? And do you have a sense as to why that may have taken place?
Yeah, so I am actually still really good friends now with the person who said this to me. And we just talked about it, and I asked them, I said, well, what kind of makes you say something like that? I'm totally okay with it now because I know that it wasn't from a negative perspective. It was just an observation per se, but kind of something that you don't really hear in our North American world, kind of. And this person just said to me, like, you're just kind of loud, and you like to talk a lot, and you share your opinions. I was like, well, I feel like that's a bit normal here, but it was just very, very interesting to hear that I was just different, I guess. Not bad, just different. And me having processed that, it kind of made me look at my surroundings a little bit differently and watch how other girls and guys interacted. I don't know if it was like a commonality between people, but I did find, like, after, I don't know if it was me, like my perspective changed, but I did find that I was noticing that men talked a lot more and women were quieter. But it was something that I noticed, but I don't think it was a bad thing. And I think it was very much just like a cultural difference between here and many other places.
That's an interesting point. I would be curious to see what the other person thought about that conversation as well. Understanding cultural differences is a big part of it, which leads to the next question. Were you able to connect or reach out to any groups or services that helped you with this adjustment? You mentioned that very quickly you were able to go on a trip with other students from the start. Was that arranged through the school, or did they have certain social groups or opportunities for you to connect with other students?
So my exchange school had a bunch of really cool Facebook groups and WhatsApp chats for international students. And we also had a large population of international students. So I think they really wanted us to feel like we were welcome and part of the fabric of that school. They did a really good job of intermingling us with the Norwegian students. So our apartment set up so there was 3 international students and then 6 Norwegian students. 3 and 3 in each apartment. So right away I got to meet 2 other students from like other countries and then 3 Norwegian students, which was really amazing. It was a really good way of integrating people. So that trip that I took right off the bat ended up being with 2 roommates that I had that were from like France and Germany, and then a couple other people that just lived in the apartment below me. And we were like, hey, you seem cool. Okay, you seem cool too. I want to go do this. Okay, let's go do it. It was very rapid, but I think it really helped that our school brought all the international students together like within the first week and like forced us to introduce ourselves to each other and kind of figure out where everyone was from and what everyone was doing. And it was really, really helpful. Also, I found, I think this is more of a European thing, but the Erasmus Student Network is like an organization that works all across Europe with international students and students studying abroad. And they planned a bunch of events and like day trips and week-long trips, and they provided a bunch of discounts for stuff. So that was also a really good opportunity to meet people. So getting involved in those groups and events that they hosted, I found I met a lot of people that way too. So I found just putting myself out there was definitely the best way of meeting people and actually going to things, even if they didn't sound super interesting or I didn't sound like I'd be interested in them. Like, getting out of my room and going to events for me was definitely one of the biggest factors in me feeling really comfortable and at home and safe in that environment.
I can only imagine what it'd be like to live with other Norwegian students and international students. It must be a pretty a pretty intriguing and unique experience to go through, and being surrounded by so many international students. How do you think this helped shape your identity while you were abroad?
Um, I honestly don't know for sure that it did shape my identity per se, but I found that became more confident in myself, just kind of like having to form almost a new version of myself. Like I didn't have any people that knew anything like my background or anything about me, so I could kind of not restart, but almost restart. And I found that I became really confident because I was forced to do things by myself and do things on my own if I wanted to get things done. And I found that I really had to put myself out there and be okay with not being in my comfort zone. So I think that really helped me, but I wouldn't say that I experienced like a heightening or a change of my identity in terms of a cultural context.
I think for a lot of students, going abroad helps them to get out of that comfort zone, as you mentioned, and to have that confidence to be more independent or to travel further or to try new things. Are there other reasons that you feel are important for students to go abroad?
Going abroad really kind of opens your eyes to new things and new people and new experiences. And I think that it really develops like a sense of independence, and it really kind of just changes your perspective on things, which I think is really important. Like getting a whole new look on life for me was very much an eye-opening experience. And I also think that as like I said, it really helped me develop my confidence. And it really made me feel secure in myself. So I think that was really important for me. I think it might have had a bigger impact if I'd been gone for longer and really had been kind of traveling more as opposed to having a home base. But I think that an exchange experience is an amazing opportunity for anybody who literally just honestly anybody. Like I recommend it to everybody that I meet now. Anybody who asks me about it, anybody who talks about mentioning it, I tell them it was like one of the best experiences of my life. And not because I was just like on a trip and traveling, but because I was like living somewhere else and being independent and having to kind of go through all these things by myself. Like even just being in a different time zone from home was difficult. That's not really something that I found I thought of beforehand, but figuring out how to try to communicate with people from home in a different time zone, like planning when I was going to talk to them, and then figuring out how I was going to talk to people away, like people who didn't speak that good of English or people whose like our cultural differences were very different. Like I found that with some people, the way that they spoke was very harsh, but the meaning of the words wasn't. So it was kind of just different in deciphering the words from the incantation of their words and understanding that nobody meant any harm and it was always just kind of very positive, but the way things were perceived was different. So again, like those changing perspectives and the different ideas and opinions that people bring, I thought was a really valuable experience for me.
Do you think now that you're back at the University of Guelph, do you have a different outlook when it comes to interacting with international students here at Guelph?
I would like to say yes, but honestly, it's hard to say just because I haven't had that experience back on campus or back in classes with those students. But it definitely like has made me respect international students a lot more. Um, just knowing that it is really difficult to go and do something completely different from what you're used to. So yeah, I definitely have a lot more respect for those students for sure.
It's important for historically underrepresented groups of students to participate in the study abroad program.
I think that it's super important because I think that everybody should be able to have that experience of a study abroad, just because I found that personally a large part of my exchange experience was from meeting people who came from different backgrounds and identities. That made my experience all the more enjoyable. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for everybody to experience. And I don't think that those historically underrepresented groups of people should be prevented from experiencing these kinds of things. I think it's something that everybody should have the opportunity to do, and I think that it should be an open experience for everybody. I just think it provides a more larger, diverse, more holistic experience for everyone. And I think that everybody should have the chance to enjoy an international study abroad experience.
Is there any other advice that you would give to students who are thinking about study abroad?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, like I kind of mentioned earlier, I just kind of rushed into my experience, like the planning process of mine. So I would highly, highly recommend doing some research before you go. If you think that you want to go on a study abroad experience, definitely look into the country that you want to go to, look into the school that you want to go to, figure out the location of where you're going, figure out how much it's going to cost you based on that country. Like Norway was so expensive, and I don't think I was really fully prepared for that. I think if I had been, I would have had a bit of a better experience. And definitely just like know where you're going. Like I said, I ended up in a completely different area than I thought I was going to be in. So I was totally okay with it when I had processed that fact. But in hindsight, I would probably do a bit more research onto where I was going. And then I would really just recommend that people go in with an open mind and be okay with being out of their comfort zone. Like I've said before, it was really hard to be in a new place with new people and a new language, and it was lonely at times, and nothing felt familiar, and everything looked different. So it was a really tough adjustment period. But I think that like knowing that you are going to have a really good time and being prepared to put yourself out there and go to events and talk to people that you wouldn't normally talk to and get out of your room and go explore and do stuff by yourself and meet people. And I think that like knowing that you will be uncomfortable for a large part of the time to begin with is a really big start to having a really good experience.
I think you touched on a lot of great points, particularly keeping an open mind and being open to meeting other people and really putting yourself out there. So thank you for that. So that's all for today's episode of the Study Abroadcast. Don't forget to explore your own study abroad opportunities on the CIP website at uoguelph.ca/CIP, or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Our Instagram handle is CIP_Guelph. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Cyan, for sharing your advice, insights, and travel stories. Stay tuned to our next episode where we will look to unpack the study abroad experience even further.